Hi, and welcome to Far From Home with me, Mabel, your host. Our guest today is another Redbud writer, Marie Hernandez-Tuten. Marie has served as a Bible teacher, life coach, speaker, mentor of women, author, and writer. She encourages women to discover the influence God has given them by pointing them to his love and truth. And she does this through writing, mentoring, and teaching at Family Life Today, the YouVersion app, in her local church ministry, and through her blog at inspiredbyfamilymag.com. She lives in Pennsylvania with her husband and has three boys. One is an adult, and one is a teenager, and the other is just about to become a teenager.
Yeah.
So, a lot of wisdom there. And I would encourage you, listeners and viewers, to go check out her blog to get encouragement and inspiration as moms, because Marie has so many resources there for mothers. So go check it out. Welcome, Marie. We are so blessed to have you as a guest on Far From Home.
Thank you for having me. And I love the work that you're doing here in just helping battle I think, some negative narratives of immigrants by creating a space for us to share our stories and truth about our journeys that are so diverse and different in so many ways. So thank you.
Thank you. And that's my hope, to do my part, in changing the narrative. And I see this podcast as a platform where immigrants, refugees can come and share their stories. So I'm just giving them a mic. And I hope that through these stories that, we tell God's story, and that we glorify him through our testimonies. So talking about, immigrant stories, I know that you're an immigrant. So let's chat about that a little bit. When did you become an immigrant, and what's your background?
So I was born in Mexico City, and my family came to the United States when I was a baby. So I was about 1 year old when we were first here in the U.S.
Okay. And do you have any siblings, or is it just you?
Yeah, I grew up with two brothers, an older brother and a younger brother. Yeah, younger brother. And then later, when I went to college, I got a little sister. So there's four of us now, but I just grew up with two brothers for most of my life.
Mhm. So how did being raised by immigrant parents, shape your identity, who you are? Because your parents moved as adults, right? So they were still, carrying part of their Mexican culture and dealing with the stress of assimilation and coping with all those changes. So I'm wondering, how did their struggles affect you, or not just their struggles, but their experience? How did it influence the way you saw yourself?
Yeah, there is so much with that question. I think being raised as by immigrant parents colored my world and impacted it in so many ways. And there were so many blessings and also challenges that came with it. I mean, some of the blessings were that it meant that family was always a part of our life. We value family and good food, music and community, hard work and faith. Those were all very much woven into my childhood and a priority in our home. Um, I think some of the I don't know if it was until I was older that I saw it more of as a challenge. I don't think I saw it as a challenge as a kid because you just do what you do and not realizing any different. But um, being a child, being an immigrant is you're straddling two worlds,
Mhm.
while not fitting, quite into either of them. So I think that can also present itself as a challenge. I definitely saw it as I got older. Um, as a elementary school child, I started to notice some of the differences in my home and my surroundings. We were mostly in a predominantly white neighborhood and community, so I definitely stood out. I had dark hair, darker skin. My family did things very differently. And probably at that time, I didn't see those things as a blessing. Like my mom loved bold colors. So my house, not the outside, but the inside of my house. I mean, I had hot pink walls, you know, amongst other colors in our house. And when you're a teen, you realize, like, from TV and visiting your friends' homes, like, that's not the normal. You don't walk into hot pink homes very often. But that was just, one of the things that I was like, oh, why can't you just have white walls like everybody else? Silly things like that you start to recognize, like, oh, okay, there's definitely a difference in how I was raised and how my friends are being raised. And some of them were blessings. Like, I came home because my mom stayed home, and um, I came home to a hot meal every single day after school.
Mm.
I did not understand the concept of, what is it, key latch kids, where the
Latchkey kids, yeah.
yes, latchkey
Hmm.
kids, where you come home and it's empty, and someone will be there later, and you make your own food until somebody comes. Like, I just didn't know that. I walked in, and my mom had a snack ready for us, and then a hot dinner for us, and we sat together as a family. Um, and even later, my dad sometimes, well, most of the time, he worked late. So if he didn't join us for dinner, when he came home, we all stopped what we were doing, and we would come to the dinner table to sit with him. Um, and that was our time together as a family. So those were things that we just did. I didn't think any different until I started to see what other friends did. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm thankful I don't have um, I'm thankful that's not my experience.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That your family prioritized family time and being together. And you said that they do things differently. One of those things you already mentioned was just like pink walls and having meals as a family together. Were were there any other things that they did differently or had a different attitude toward things that were different from uh, Americans who are not immigrants?
Yeah, there are so many different things. One of the funnier ones that I can think of was, there is a lot of superstition in our culture.
Mhm.
So there were things that we weren't allowed to do, like if it was lightning outside. My mom would have me put a towel over my hair, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand. I just did what I was told. And I remember sharing this in college, and my friends were like, "What? What did you do?" And I was like, "You didn't do." I was like, no. I was like, okay, I guess it's like a Hispanic thing. I don't know, or
Yeah,
a Hernandez thing. Maybe it's not
yeah,
even a Mexican thing, but just my family,
yep.
So yeah, lots of very interesting things that we did and didn't even think differently and tell you
Yeah.
other people, and they're like, I know, that's not common.
And
Um,
did you grow up in a bilingual home?
we actually, my dad spoke English. He was the one that worked outside the house, so he picked it up right away. My mom did not pick it up right away, so we weren't allowed to speak English because my mom didn't speak English. So in our house, well, and it wasn't just because of that, but it was also to maintain our language and culture in our home. So in our home, we spoke Spanish only until we got older, and my siblings and I would speak English to each other. But when we would be together as a family, it would be in Spanish.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, was there any point in time, like during school or college, where you or your family faced any kind of discrimination, whether it was outwardly or subtle?
Yeah, unfortunately, we live in a society that doesn't understand how to embrace diversity. And I remember as a little girl, because I was an English speaker and my mom was not, at a very young age, as early as 5, when I went to school and learned English. I was translating for my family, for my mom, and I would hear the things that others would say, like, because she didn't understand, so she would be talking to me in Spanish, and I could hear them either mumbling or telling her, in her face, go back to your country, or if you're going to live here, learn the language, or things like that that I knew were being said because I spoke English. So yeah, lots of comments like that I I I definitely knew they weren't being nice. But at that age, as little as that, at that time, it wasn't impacting me until I started school and then seeing, oh, okay, we definitely live in a world that doesn't see brown as beautiful. And when you grow up in your home, I mean, that's what your parents do, is they think you're beautiful and they tell
Hmm.
you, and then you go out and you enter the world and it's like, oh, no, you're not, because you're different. So I think that was a constant, thing in my younger years as a teenager, was trying to fit in, to the world around me and not be as Mexican, um, which, as I got older, I didn't want to speak Spanish outside my home. Like,
Mm.
I tried to avoid it. And when you look Hispanic and someone looks at you that speaks Spanish and starts speaking Spanish to you, it's hard to pretend like you don't speak that language. But I often acted like I didn't know Spanish because I wanted to fit in with everybody else, not realizing that one day it was going to be a wonderful asset,
Yeah.
um, and that I would get paid more because I speak another language.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of those things, right, that we go through in our young days, that we see as a minus or a disadvantage. And only later on, when we get wiser, we know that those things are actually advantages, are benefits. Thank you
Definitely.
for sharing that. Yeah. Let's talk about your church community. What kind of church did you and your family go to growing up?
We went to a Spanish speaking church, which was made up of mostly immigrants. I think you and Shireen talked about the immigrant church in one of your podcasts. So it was very typical, where it was Hispanics from all different countries that would come together and commune and and worship God in Spanish, but also to have other people who knew the journey of not
Mhm.
being belonging, of surviving in another world that's not your own, and missing um, your country and your family. And I did not experience that because I was a baby, so I didn't miss my country, but I knew that my parents, they left. They left their whole family. They left their language and their their comfort zone. And I now, as an adult, I can't even imagine what that would be like to move into a country where I don't know anything, anyone, the language, and you're starting from ground zero.
Mm.
So to look back and think now, like the courage, and perseverance that it took on my parents' part to come in to another country. And I would even say, like, they didn't come in as wealthy immigrants. They came
Mm.
in a lower class immigrants. So they weren't just the challenges weren't only from the typical immigrant, but also that they were trying to survive in a coming from a low socioeconomic place.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about how your parents' immigrant experience, how your experience shaped your identity. But I also wanted to ask you how it shaped your faith. Like, how did it affect your relationship with God?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think it has evolved as I've grown up. I, th- I grew up predominantly Catholic. My
Mhm.
parents were raised Catholic as children. So when I was little, we went to a Catholic church, and what the Catholic Church did really well was help me and my family see that God cared and God listened, and we could talk to Him. Um, I didn't learn about Jesus as my Savior until later, when we were a part of a Christian evangelical church. And that was my dad coming to a place of realizing that we were in the Catholic Church. He was praying to a man-made statue. And that was the beginning of his journey of, I don't I don't want to pray to a man-made statue.
Mhm.
So we ended up at a evangelical Bible church, where there were no statues, and that was the beginning journey of coming to know Jesus Christ as our Savior. Um, so it was deeply faith has been deeply woven into our family, and even before us, my grandparents and their Catholic faith set a foundation for us to come to know Jesus Christ as our Savior, even though they didn't know what they were doing. They were
Mhm.
just doing their
Yeah.
traditional. So I can see that now, where before it was, oh, those were the Catholics, and these are the Christian. And it's like, oh, there is a difference, and there's beauty in both of them. And the Catholic faith um, set a foundation for
Yeah.
us as
Mhm.
we came to know Jesus Christ as our Savior.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a Christian mom, I was wondering if you have any words of advice for other Christian moms who are immigrants like me. Like my son came here when he was over a year old, right? And my husband and I are immigrants from India. So, what advice would you give um, to immigrant parents who want to raise their children in a godly way?
Yeah, I I think that the more we embrace who we are, all of us, all of who we are, um, it really helps us give roots to our culture, our faith, and then pass that on to our children. And as we first arrive, as people first come to the US, it's so easy to want to fit in, and we lose a part of who we are, and those roots of where we've come from. But remembering that and embracing it, there's so much freedom in that. And I wrote down a quote from Tasha June, and it says, she has a book out that she wrote.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it right now, but
Tell me your dream, is it?
yes, yeah. And
Yeah,
she says, when we begin to see the interconnectedness of our search for identity and our search for Jesus, we will begin to head toward home and help others toward home and toward being truly known. And I think
beautiful.
there's beauty in, as I've gotten older, for myself as well, is embracing and showing up as fully Madi, and not the version that everybody else wants to see, or the only part of Madi that people want to hear about, or see, but fully who I am and how God has made us to be. And that includes my culture. I don't think becoming a Christian erases our
Mhm.
culture and ethnicity. It helps us connect
Yeah.
those things back to Him. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, because he has given us that ethnicity, right? It's he who has woven us in our mother's womb, like the psalmist says. And he's placed us in the countries where we were born or raised. And so I think that ethnicity and our cultural roots are God-given and makes us who we are. Um, Thank you for sharing that. So tell us about your blog. What was the story behind why you started it, and what do you hope to um, achieve through that blog?
We were missionaries in Ecuador 6 years ago, and we lived in South America for 9 years. So the goal was to connect my family and friends to our world when what we were doing in Ecuador. So it started as a hobby and as a way to connect with those that we left behind here in the US. Um, and then God took it into completely different places and open doors that I never would have imagined. Um, and it became an outlet, a creative outlet for
Mhm.
me that I didn't have. I have a creative side, and it was something beautiful that started to shape as I was able to see, through my writing, um, and find, even I think writing, it can be healing. So
Mhm.
part of that as well was was some healing and sharing God's truth. So many things there that when we're writing, we're like, okay, we want to encourage others, but where this
Yeah.
is also bringing healing to my heart,
Mhm.
and taking some of the things that I love to share with other moms.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. And I can relate to that. And I think sometimes that, especially when we write like Christian articles and blog posts and we want to encourage others, it's not like a lesson that we've learned and it's done. Sometimes we can come back to our own blog posts and learn. So it's not that we're teaching and we're done with that aspect of our lives and we're going to tackle
Right.
another problem. No.
Yes, definitely a journey. And so many times I've gone back and I'm like, oh, I said that. I really need to, I really need to listen to that right now.
Yeah. um So my last question before I have you read the poem that you wrote is about, you were telling me earlier when we chatted that hospitality is important to you and your family. Can you tell me more about that? Why is that?
Yeah, I think the immigrant journey is one of finding home and in being in places where you don't feel like you belong. And I think my parents modeled that very well in making our home a place where others were welcomed. There was always someone at our table during the holidays that either my dad had just met or that he saw at the store, and they didn't have family, so he invited them. It was just a constant thing, and I think a part of that was because he knew what it felt like to be away from family during the holidays and not to have a place with your loved ones. So he wanted to create a space for that. I learned that from him and my mom. And now as adults with our own kids, I definitely want our kids to see the importance of having a place at our table for others who don't belong, but also learning what can we learn from our guests. And I always have them have a couple of questions ready for our guest because I want them to be a part of the conversation. And that's a part of learning. You just never know what your guests will have gone through and experience, whether it was hard or beautiful, and that opportunity to learn about someone else's culture and experiences is something I want my kids to see as valuable.
Yeah. And I love that idea of having questions ready. And I think what you're doing there is also cultivating in them this practice of listening, that, other people have stories. And if only we listened, we can get to know one another better.
Yeah,
So that.
definitely.
So now, please share the poem that you wanted to, that you wrote, right? On what's the title of the poem?
It is I Am From, and I
Okay.
actually wrote it for our Red Bud retreat. Were you there not this one, but last year? Um,
No,
no, you weren't
this
there.
was my first one. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I wrote it for that retreat, and that was the first time I read it out loud. So this is my second time reading it
Oh,
out
we're
loud.
honored to. We've never had anyone recite a poem on the podcast, so this is such a blessing. Please, whenever you're ready.
It's called I Am From. I am woven from the thread of sun-kissed skin, hard-working hands, and spicy salsa. I am from people whose faith runs as deep and as rich as the soil they labored over long ago. I am from dreamers, storytellers, fighters, village doctors, and homes that always made room for one more. I am from a long line of strong women and resilient people who journeyed thousands of miles away to a foreign land. I am a child of immigrants, straddling two worlds, trying to find my way home. I am from people who valued education, family, respecting your elders, and never forgetting where you've come from. I am from a world that claims to be colorblind, but no matter what I've achieved or accolades I've received, all they see is the color of my skin. But I am still standing because greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. I am from the God who pulled a little girl out of the slums of Mexico and called her by name. I am from the great I am who gets the last word on who I am.
Ah, that was beautiful. I have goosebumps and tears, and I didn't know I'll need a tissue for this episode. But yeah, please tell us where we can find that poem, and I'd like to post it in the show notes. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share it. I definitely never know if I'm going to cry.
Oh, you made me cry for sure. So thank you so much, Marie, for talking with us. This was a blessing. And I don't usually say this, but you painted such a beautiful picture of your parents. So please give your parents a hug from me. They
Oh,
don't
thank
know
you.
me, but It was wonderful to learn about them through you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for giving me a space to share. And I think it was definitely therapeutic as I thought through my childhood and the questions you sent me. And I think it's good for us to go back and remember who we are and where we've come from so that we can walk in it fully.
Absolutely. And so that we can give God the praise and glory, and we can see how, in his providence, how he has brought us to himself,
Yes.
and using you and your family to reach out to others with his love. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Bye.